I read this morning. A kindergarten teacher was walking around observing her classroom of children. And they were drawing pictures, and so she gets to one, and she asked her, what are you drawing? And she said, well, I'm drawing God. The teacher said, well, no one knows what God looks like. And she didn't even look up from her drawing. The little girl said, well, they will in a minute. How many of y'all have a child or a grandchild like that? I mean, you just check in your brain. They're smarter. They've got it all. Sunday school teacher asked the children right before they dismissed to go into church, now, why is it necessary to be quiet in church? And Annie replies, because people are sleeping. Be quiet because people are sleeping. We have ushers for that. We just loaded with spit wads and stuff like that, hit people in the back of the head. At Sunday school, they were learning how God created everything, including human beings. And Johnny was intent when the teacher told him how Eve was created out of one of Adam's ribs. Later in the week, his mother noticed him lying down like he was ill and said, Johnny, what's the matter? And he said, I have a pain in my side. I think I'm going to have a wife. Anyway, love those kids. Well, first I just want to say that in all these years of ministry that Delia and I have been in, I've never felt any more smack dab. Let me get this in the center here. Jolynn notices that I like everything in order. But anyway, I've never felt more smack dab in the middle of the will of God than I do right now. And my strength has been renewed. My joy is abundant. There's peace on every hand. My hope is aflame. How many of you know we have to have hope in every situation, and the vision is clear? And earlier this summer, I was studying scriptures on prayer, and I sensed that God was saying, we need to call the church to prayer. You know, we've done this 21 days of prayer and fasting usually, and we'll do that at the first of the year, but I just felt that we should go with the 7 days right now, because sometimes the 21 days just seems like that's forever and ever, especially if you are fasting. It is forever and ever. The clock slows down when you're fasting. I just want you to know that. The days, the calendar, everything just slows down. So if your days are just shooting past you, try fasting. But I thought this will bring more of us on board, because I really want to do this. Just take out that capsule of time and concentrate on prayer together. And so shorten this time, but it's still going to be something that we want everyone to be involved with. And so we invite you to participate in this very special time, prayer and fasting. A couple of resources I want to give you, and they're online. There is a fasting guide that I put together a few years ago, and I've revamped it from time to time. It's not conclusive, but it is on the web. And you go to christfamily.tv/connect. And then 7 days. And then also online in that same Connect column there is a Pray First booklet written by Chris Hodges, Church of the Highland. And you can find that there too on the Connect tab. But anyway, these are a couple of resources that will help you. That's a prayer guide that he has put together. It's not a fasting guide, it's a prayer guide. And take the advantage of that. It's in the PDF form, but you can just add in your notes and the journal part of it. I think I like that, the part where it has a journal, that during this time, this is what we will expect God to do. So I'm just going to talk this morning, kick off this series that I'm calling Turn Your World Right Side Up. And today I want to speak on the fast that God chooses. We're going to go to Isaiah, the 58th chapter. This is a chapter that is known for fasting. I've got a few comments to make about this, and I just believe that God is going to open our understanding about what really happens when we fast, not only as individuals, when we fast together. So let's begin with verse 1. This is the word to Isaiah. Shout it aloud and do not hold back. Raise up your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them. And they say, why have we fasted and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and you exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. I'm not sure what was going on there, but somebody got ticked. That's all I know. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen, only a day for people to humble themselves? It is only for bowing one's head like a reed, for lying in sackcloth and ashes. Is this what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? So that's what we're aiming for, is the fast that is acceptable to the Lord. So here's God's assessment. Let me give it to you, these 4 points. First of all, they're acting like everything's okay. You know, it's just like there's a white elephant here, there's a white elephant there, there's a white elephant there, and the whole nation is messed up. And yet they're saying to themselves, you know, we don't understand what's going on. And we fasted and we prayed, but what's happening? It's kind of like, have you ever caught your child? They they're doing something, because when you come into the room, they look at you and they go, what? What? It's like God shows up, all this stuff is going on, and then, the whole nation is in disarray, and the leaders look at God and go, what? Number 2, so they're blaming God for unanswered prayer. We've prayed. How many times have we heard that? Oh, I've done all that I could. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I've done my part. I've just been really calling upon God night and day. And then, I love it because Facebook throws you under the bus, because people look and read and see you've just been goofing off. Then it says they're expecting their outward acts of humility to gain the favor of God. See, don't I know that God sees my heart? Don't I know that God looks beyond the pretense of the outward? Don't I know that God sees stuff that's going on? He knows what's really happening. So it's one thing to put on an act in front of people, but when you're performing before an audience of one, it's quite another thing. I remember one time I was thrown into a situation where I knew a lot of eyes were on me. And when those eyes were on me, I was just diligent, I was sweet, I was nice and everything else. When I got alone with the Lord, I just started kind of letting Him have it. Lord, this is terrible. And then here was another thing that they're doing. They're using personal piety to justify the mistreatment of other people. So they thought, because I'm being religious, because I'm doing what I should do, then that kind of justifies my bad attitudes. I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, because any way I say it, it will be understood. But some of the meanest people I've ever met were people that claimed to be Christians. They do everything, pray and just pray and go to church and do all that. But boy, you get them alone, they're meaner than a junkyard dog. And I had an uncle one time. He's in heaven now, so he's figured it all out. So Uncle Fred, I'm sure you don't mind me talking like this, but I remember he was one of my favorite uncles. He was just kind of but he cussed all the time. And then he got saved. He didn't cuss anymore. He just became an ornery cuss. And I never could figure it out, why he would, when he got saved, he just got religion too. And I'm just going to say, when you get saved, don't get religious on us, okay? We're all still sinners saved by grace, right? So don't stick up our nose just because we know 3 scriptures and we have heard a tape or listened to something on the radio or have read our Bible. We are all sinners saved by grace. But these people here, they're beating up on people. They're fasting, but they're whooping up on folk. And so I don't know if it's a literal pummeling that was taking place here, but the point is made. You can't go around being spiritual and just abuse people simply because you are spiritual. So this was the condition of the nation. They've got it all wrong. They think that just because they are fasting, everything is okay. As a matter of fact, they are blaming God for the lack of answered prayer. And so he continues on. Look at verse 6. Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? I've chosen this, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke. Listen to the verbiage there. To set the oppressed free, to break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter when you see them naked, and to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? And so as I read this, I realize that first of all, God wants this kind of fast. This is a fast He's chosen. First of all, the kind of fast that releases His purpose. There's a purpose in this. We're aiming somewhere. We're not just doing this aimlessly. There's a purpose. You can go to that next slide then. There's a purpose for what God is calling us to do. This week when we fast together, we're going to be fasting with purpose. We're going to fast with an aim. You know, one of the things that he said is that you're doing your own aims and your own pleasures. You're doing this for your own ambition or for your own reasons, but let's choose to do it God's way. And the second thing is that we fast to release God's power. We fast to release God's power. I'm going to promise you in advance that God is going to show you and reveal to you His power as you fast and pray. Listen to how he says that. There's the loosing of the captives. The oppressed go free. The cords of the yoke, that's burdens, are broken off. And you get this picture of a yoke. And of course in Bible days and even in our days, the yoke is the instrument that is used to tie a couple of beasts together in the field. And they can only move at the pace of the one, move at the pace of the one who is the slowest. But then also they had another yoke, and that was a yoke that was placed upon the shoulders with weights on both sides. And that's what he's talking about. Why don't you help the people that are going through times of weakness? And we've all been there. We've all done that. If you're struggling with your faith or with something that has hold of you, you're the object of my prayer this week, because I believe that God can release us and set us free. And sometimes we don't have faith for ourselves, but others can have faith for us. Got it? I remember one time I had a very, very dear friend, and he came to me and he shared with me. And by the way, he's with the Lord too, and he had a great testimony in the end of this. But he came to me, shared with me that he'd given his heart to another woman other than his wife. And it was just a sad situation. We're sitting there in the office, and I say to him, man, I can't believe this is happening. And he said, well, I can't either, but I just want out of the situation. And he's willing to throw 25 or plus years of marriage down the drain for an affair with another woman. And he asked me, so do you think that I'll go to hell if I divorce my wife? And I lied to him. I said, you're going to split hell wide open, because I was just kind of mad. And I said, well, I don't know, Dennis. I'm not the judge. And so he said, well, I couldn't even pray with him. You know, how do you pray? And so he left. And I was not just disturbed by it. I was just a little bit ticked, chickening out of this situation, this marriage. And so then God touched my heart. And four of us, his cousin, and because there was only four, and no one else knew, and we talked about it. And his cousin was in the church, and her husband, Delia, and I, the four of us, covenanted together and went on 3 days of prayer and fasting for him. I get a call in the middle, not in the middle of the night, but late night, can I come and talk to you tomorrow? And I said, absolutely. And we sit down, and he said, I don't know what in the world happened. But he said, God has changed my heart. God has changed my heart. And I said, well, how did it happen? I don't know, man. He said, all of a sudden, I don't want to do this. I've reconciled with my wife. I'm trying to anyway. I've reconciled with my family. And the end of it, he came to me one day and he said, can I just get before the church and tell them that God is a miracle worker? I said, absolutely. I'm telling you, there may be things that you're facing that you just can't figure out. There may be a burden there. There may be a weight there. There may be something in your heart that is going askew, that is going astray. But I'm telling you that there's power in prayer and fasting. That's why this is not an Old Testament ritual. It is a biblical principle carried forth into the New Testament. And there's a reason why the Apostle Paul said, I am in fastings often. Because we have to keep our hearts right, and we have to help others through this. Number 3, releasing God's provision. Just remember this, that throughout history, the oppressed have been very near to the heart of God. And what he is saying here is he says, you can master spiritual discipline, but if you ignore the needs that are out there in the community, then forget it. Because the fruit of spiritual devotion is manifest in practical ways. The Apostle John says this, that you show that you love God by loving other people. And so we may say, he said, how can you say you love God, but you don't love people? And you might say, well, I don't really love them, but I do tolerate them. But God calls us to do more than just tolerate. He calls us to love them. So I want to finish with this. Go to the 8th verse. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. This is the part I love. And then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. 5 promises I see here real quickly. Number 1, light breaks through like the dawn. I just call it new vision, clarity, hope. You'll experience this. You'll see it. It happens. Because beyond the hunger pains will come the sense of God's pleasure and the sense of God's nearness. And can't we handle a little bit of that? Just when God just kind of shows up, literally pumping hope into you for your life's future. Jesus said, I have come that you might have life, and that more abundantly. And maybe for some of us, it's been a while since we have sensed the pleasure of God upon our lives. And now's the time to do it. 18 years ago, Delia and I embarked on our first extended fast time. I mean, we jumped into a 40-day fast. And I'm telling you, that was quite an experience. But I had sat down at a breakfast table in a conference with Dr. Bill Bright and his wife. And they were telling the story about how he was telling the story about how he had gone 40 days fasting. And I looked at this man of God. You know, he was a great man of God, founder of Campus Crusade. And as he was talking, I just made the decision in my heart, I'm going to do that. So went home, talked to Delia about it. God had spoken to her about it. And every night, listen to this very closely, every night we would sit down. Sometimes, I don't know why we did this, but I would just sit on the floor of our living room there in St. Louis, Missouri, sit on the floor, and we would pray over our combined prayer points. And I'm telling you right now that many things that are happened and have happened in our lives from 18 years ago to now, I can trace them back to that season where we concentrated on some specific issues and some specific initiatives and said, God, we want to see this happen. We prayed for our children. We didn't have grandchildren yet, but we prayed for the grandchildren to be. We prayed for our future. We prayed over our family. We prayed over our city. We prayed over our church. We prayed over where we would be, because that was a season where there was a little bit of uncertainty and we weren't sure what was going to happen next. But the doors opened and God made it happen. So today's season of petition and even sacrifice, yes, you can use the term sacrifice because it is sacrificial. It prepares us for tomorrow's challenges and victories. This is the time to lay the groundwork for tomorrow, for what lies ahead. Because, if you load your rifle after the enemy has come into the camp, you're going to lose out. We cannot be spiritual Barney Fifes that walk around with the weapon, but we've got the bullet there somewhere, and when the break-in takes place, he's trying to load it. See, through prayer and fasting, you get yourself loaded. Through prayer and fasting, we prepare ourselves. And so that when the opportunity arises or the challenge arises, we're ready for it, because we are living and ministering out of a full cup. And let me tell you something else, too, about this, that hope breeds hope. And when there's a spark of hope, it'll cause you to begin to pray with faith. I love hope because hope is energizing. When there's a spark of hope, just a spark, just a little spark of hope, your prayer, you can pray a prayer of faith. And that prayer of faith becomes like a seed that is planted into the whole operation, and it becomes a seed that produces even more hope. And the more hope you have, the more faith you can pray with. And so it's kind of this glorious cycle of life, and it has that snowball effect, And man, once that thing starts going downhill, and we have people praying with faith and hope, bar the door, Katie, here we come, because something is going to be taking place. Well, God could do this on his own. Obviously he can and could. And it's the mystery of creation, because I wasn't there to help God out when he said, boom, let there be light, boom, let there be earth, boom, let there be man, boom, let there be woman. I wasn't there for that. You weren't there for that. We weren't praying that would happen. But in creation, what God did was he made us as partners with him, so that he moves in the heavenlies as prayer takes place on earth. And so that's the way that it happens. Second thing, healing will appear. Physical, emotional, spiritual breakthroughs suddenly. I think many of us can attest to that. God moves through healing. Physicians will tell you that even just in a normal routine of existence, that fasting in a proper way gives the body rest and makes us healthier. Let's just go on. He says that your righteousness will go before you. That means that favor will precede your steps. I was sharing with someone this week that just as we all have languages of love, Gary Smalley's, the languages of love, and I never can remember them. So I can't remember your languages. That's why you don't think I love you, probably. But I mean, it's like words of affirmation, touch, and so you've got them all. There's 5 of them total. But I never can remember them. But we do know that different people have language. But you know what? We have languages of love just in a spiritual way too. And that is that we sense the manifestation of God's love toward us in different ways. And for me, it's open doors. I like to feel the presence of God. But that isn't, that's not something that necessarily, I say, oh, wow, now I know that God loves me. But boy, when there's an open door, when you have been knocking, and then finally you quit knocking, and boom, the door opens. Brand new door opens. God shows you this. Now walk through this. That's my language of love. And what he says here is he says that when you commit yourself to my chosen fast, my way of praying and fasting, that favor will precede your steps. And don't think for a minute that this is for people that are in full-time ministry. This works whatever field you're involved in. I am imagining teachers this year going into this new school year with just a renewed fervor, less stress, more energy, more stamina than they have ever imagined. I am expecting people who have been laid off, finding jobs, and not just finding any old job. I'm talking about great jobs and good jobs. I believe that marriages that are maybe on the rocks or maybe shaky, that they'll get off the rocks and get on the rock of Jesus. I just believe that whatever we've been asking for, if we just add in that extra caveat of fasting with prayer and gathering together corporately and praying. How many of you know it's not just a one-man show? It's not just one person doing it. You look through the Bible. Yes, I know that God called Moses, but he surrounded him with some helpers and people that were equally as faithful as he was. I know that God called Noah. He couldn't have done it without his boys. I mean, there's just always this corporate, there's this community thing that happens. And I am anxious and excited to see what will happen as we do it together. Number 4, the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. I see that as protection and preservation. Not only protection, but that ground that you have gained, you keep that ground. You know, sometimes we feel like that we're taking a step forward and 2 steps backward, and it's just gradually going back. But let me just tell you that once you got the ground, you've got it. If you're building a building, you don't have to lay that brick again. You are just putting it brick on brick upon brick upon brick upon brick upon brick. And in your life, that which you accomplish today doesn't have to be and will not be lost. You can trust God to preserve that which has been gained. And then this final one, I love it. I love this. And let me just read it. It says, when you call for help, he will answer. That's successful prayers, but I love it. He says, then you will call, verse 9, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. Here am I. And you'll know. You just simply will know. To me, Isaiah 58 cuts through the chase, just lays it out there for us. Want breakthrough? Do it my way. You want to see it happen? Do it my way. Why has he engaged us as just simple human beings in this thing? I don't know. But according to Psalms, the 8th chapter, who are you that God would be mindful of you? But he's made you a little lower than the angels, but he has made you as a person whom he delights to put his joy, his faith, his glory, his everything into, so that you become partners with him in the enterprise. Are you excited about it? So let's do it together. Just that final word there, let's throw that up there. And it says, seek the Lord together, and let's expect great things. Let's stand together.